Of the 16 million Americans who served during World War II, 1/4 never made it overseas. Air Force Staff Sergeant Chester Berger was among that group. He was stationed in Los Angeles for a total of
3 years, 1 month, 15 days, 2 hours, and 15 minutes. I remember it vividly because it was a very big moment in being discharged in February of 1946.
Collecting shoulder patches was a popular hobby to pass the time. Worn by members of individual units and platoons, some patches were standard issue while others were handmade. Yank magazine, the Armed Forces publication, contained a want ad section where soldiers listed patches that they wanted to trade.
And the custom was that soldiers didn't have to pay postage on our envelopes. We just wrote the word free in the corner and the mail went through without a stamp. Didn't cost us anything.
Chester amassed more than 1,000 patches during the war. His collection is perhaps the most complete in the United States. It includes extremely rare items such as the patch worn by members of the Manhattan Project, who built the atomic bomb.
The one that I had the most difficulty collecting was finding one that had the insignia Yank correspondent. Probably couldn't have been more than a couple of dozen people in the military who were authorized to wear that insignia.
After the war, Chester didn't have enough space for the patches in his small Brooklyn apartment. So he wrote a letter to the New York Public Library asking if he could donate the collection.
They said yes, so I packed them in a box and brought them over on the subway. And I thought they would be put in a carton somewhere in the sub-basement and never seen again.
But the collection held people's attention, so much so that the years began to take their toll.
I was contacted about a year ago by Ruth Carr, who is the curator for the Milstein division, and she had a scrapbook of military patches that were donated to the library by Chester Berger a number of years ago. And given the nature of the materials, they had started to break down and they were so fragile that they really couldn't be looked at. And she wanted to know if there was anything that we could do to preserve them so that they could be used by researchers in the future.
One of the first things I did was to disbind them and clean them on the surface.
After the cleaning, Beth stabilized the paper tears with special heat-activated tissues. Then she mounted the pages on new acid-free backing and encased them in mylar sleeves and new albums.
The entire effort took me about 380-something hours, almost 400 hours.
After Beth finished, the library's conservation lab invited Chester to visit and see the new bindings. It was the first time he'd seen the scrapbooks in many years.
I was astonished because I had not seen them in all those years, and they have been so beautifully mounted and preserved by the preservation department. I think it's a work of art, and I'm enormously grateful to the New York Public Library for what it has done.
The lab technicians had an extra surprise for Chester.
Each of the scrapbooks was composed of 2 covers and then the pages themselves with spacers in between. And it was only when we were unearthing everything yesterday and spreading them out so that we could prepare for the tour today that we saw all of the pieces together. And we noticed every one of them had some sort of paint on it. And we realized that there was a story here.
It was astonishing. I have no recollection of cutting up the cardboard, making the strips. And the best guess I can make is that I must have picked up a piece of cardboard in the Los Angeles Army recruiting office in January 1946 and used that somehow. Maybe I put it in my suitcase when I was discharged and came home with it and cut it up for that purpose.
To find something like that, some part of it that was so customized and completely ephemeral that was never really meant to be an object. And to have the creator here and to ask him about it, it was incredibly rewarding and really heartwarming. And now we know more about them.
It's an unusual situation that we would invite someone to the conservation lab to look at something that they had donated to us. But in particular, these materials are ephemeral. They're not meant to last a very long time. And it's one of the great things that we love to work on. By our intervention, we're able to make sure that they continue on and are able to be used by people in the future.